It was great listening to the legal side of that, because that's really where JAK Bank is today. That we're because we're a registered bank, we're in a quagmire of regulations and reporting, and we basically have one full-time employee, and we basically have introduced a new accounting system just to be able to comply with the regulations. So it's very true that on the one hand you have the advantages of being a bank, and on the other side you have the disadvantages, and that's what I see sitting in the board, these conversations going on almost every meeting. Well, I think what I'd like to do is just tell you a little bit about JAK Bank. I mean, JAK Bank and experience from JAK Bank could be very interesting, I think. If you're thinking of going down that route, is to learn a lot from what we've done, and some of the challenges we're having, and some of the things that have been working for us. So JK Bank is a cooperative bank, and it's registered as a cooperative bank in Sweden. It has 40,000 members, and it's the largest cooperative bank in the country. There are a couple of others. I think I'll try and move. How do I do this? Try and get to the next picture. 1 second. Technical. Yeah, I just want to give you an idea about where this all started, because this actually came from the Danes back in the 30s, and there were a lot of Danes who were saying sort of things I think a lot of members of MAN are saying, that the money system is all screwed up, it's all wrong, we've got to do something else. And in the 30s they created their own currency. Now JAK stands for Jord, which is earth, A, which is labour, and K, which is capital. And a lot of them were farmers at the time, and what they were saying is that if you see this, if you can see my screen, it's sort of is intended to represent an enterprise. Is that the enterprise gets an input of things from the earth, that can be metals or biological inputs, like seeds or something. You've then got labour, which is people's work, and work is the changing of state of things from one to another. And then capital, but for them capital wasn't money. Capital was built capital, things like infrastructure, things like human capital, knowledge, or social capital like organisations. They didn't see money as capital. And so the idea is you put these three together in a sensible way, and then you get the service out which creates a standard of living for everyone. And that's where JAK came from. So for them it was like, we can't hang ourselves up on money, because the problem with happening then was, and I think it's even today, is that we're doing the opposite, and that is that we're using things from the earth, we're using labour, and we're using infrastructure, and we're not creating a service, we're actually creating more financial capital. That's to say, we're mining the earth and taking out its nourishment and turning it into money, which is, to me, would be the definition of stupidity. But a lot of people call it economics.
That was beautifully put.
Anyway, that's where it came from, and in many ways, the members and the feeling of that time is that we're going to have to, as Bill Morrison, the founder of permaculture, said, first of all, we learned to grow food, and now we're going to have to learn to make our own seeds, and now we're going to have to be bankers too, if we're going to get this thing right. So I think that was the feeling of that time. Now, there's a little bit of history there. They were a lending circle back in the 1970s when they started, and they started with an interest-free system, and it was members owned. It had this solidarity focus, and for them, sound money isn't money where you speculate on assets. And it was interesting what our lawyer friend said about Wall Street. You know, there is a problem with the world in that people take a loan on an asset like a house, but its value is so high that they won't be able to pay it back in their lifetime. That's not sound money. That's just making money on flipping assets, which is basically what Wall Street is all about. And these assets, of course, are shares in corporations or owning real estate. So that they weren't into that. They got their bank license in 1997, and apart from loans, we offer basic banking services, which means you get an account, you can pay your bills. We've got a credit card now. There's a members newspaper. There are a lot of local chapters. There are 27 local chapters in Sweden. There are 298 municipalities, so we've got a long way to go to get a chapter in each municipality. But another thing about the bank is, and I think we'll be coming back to this, is that they do folk education. And folk education is like adult education, and it's being offered in, if you like, in the Scandinavian way. Scandinavian way of education is sort of telling people stuff and helping them make their own minds up, rather than being very detailed. So that's the JK Bank.
Can you take a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Shoot.
So what's your definition of sound money? If it's not asset speculation, what is it?
Well, sound money is money in the real economy. I'll give an example. If I come to Madison and I buy a house, and it costs me, I don't know what a house costs over there, but say it costs $100,000, then actually I actually don't create any work. I just put $100,000, say, in your pocket if I buy it from you. However, if I come to Madison and I build a house from scratch and pay, say, $100,000, then I'm creating work. And the whole idea of sound money is, we can say like this: people don't want money, really. They want that which money buys. And if you were able to get that which money buys without using money, you probably would. Are you with me?
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yes, that's our whole premise. Great.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole thing, isn't it? We want that. We want together to create that which money buys.
Yes.
Without being bogged down by a money system, which doesn't give us that which money buys. It just it's doing something else, which is probably dysfunctional. Now, they had to get a bank license in 1997, and it was because they got too big. And as some of the legal things here were pointed out, that when you go above a certain number of people, the law starts to come in. Over here, you can do a limited liability share organisation with 30 shareholders, but you go above 30, and then you have to register the companies being publicly owned. There's things like that. So we had to get the back license in 1997 because of that. Okay?
Yes, great.
Now let's just talk about the point system, but let me talk about, before I talk about that, the whole thing of having a bank. I mean, you just say the word bank, and don't you sit upright in your chair a little bit more? You know what I mean? It's like, let's talk about bank. Okay, I'm from a bank. I sit up in my chair. You know, like I talk about, let's talk about alternative currency, and people like, you know, go back and get all relaxed. but this thing about oh, Alison has left. She doesn't like my jokes. But this was the thing about having a bank, in that people, that the members really wanted to make a difference in society. And at the same time, you know, the word credit, Latin, means credo, which means I believe. And it's all about believability. And, you know, a lot of people are saying, you know, money doesn't exist. It's only credibility and things like that. There's a lot about that. Because what you do is a bank starts to formalize a relationship. And that formal relationship is something that, because it's formalized, it creates a kind of security in people. Now, it really wasn't enough just to have a bank. What they needed to do was to formalize the lending and borrowing. And the system they come up with, which is very much sociocracy in a way, it's like good enough for now and safe enough for try, sort of thing. They said, well, let's have a point system. We'll lend money to each other. What we'll do is we'll all put money into a pot. We'll all put the money into this pot. And then when we need the money, those who need the money will take the money out. There's a little bit the way I heard you, Stephanie, talking about the idea of being a man. Mm-hmm. So when you put £1 in, that comes with it point, and that crown will keep earning points as long as you keep the money in the bank. Remember, it's in your account. It's not given to anyone else. It's in your account. That means they're your points. Now, when you take that crown out, or if someone else takes that crown out, then it stops earning points. Now, I'll give you, it's 1 krona, 1 point. So, say I put in 1 million into the bank, 1 million crowns, and it's been there a month. That's great, because then I've earned 1 million points. And if I leave it there for a year, I've learned 1 million in 1 year, and that means I get 120 million points. I seem to have missed out some zeros there, I'm sorry. Points. Sustainability people are really bad at big numbers. That's my excuse. So that's the way it works. So everyone was like saving, taking money out when they needed it, saving, and then they were accumulating these points. Are you with me? The way the point system so far?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good enough to know. So here's an example from our website. Our website, by the way, is in English, so you can go in and see some of the explanations. So you've got a month there, you've got 10 months, and someone deposits. Instead of having money in, they started to deposit. So the first month they put in 1,000. They put in 1,000 crowns every month. That generates the number of points, and then you get 55,000 points after those 10 months. Now that means that you can borrow money for the equivalent. And how do you borrow the money? That's the next slide. So when you borrow the money, what you do is P is the monthly payment. Now there's a fee, of course, and most of the fee is handling the money and having to pay for the compliance, and it's about 3%. That gives you one clue as to why maybe a JAK bank isn't the future. But anyway, it costs 3%. Then you do the repayment, which is the mortgage, which is the principal that you've borrowed, divided by the term in months. And then, of course, you have to save. Now, if you saved an equivalent number of points, you don't have to put that money into the bank. If you save none, then you have to save as much as you borrowed, which is the reverse. So say if I borrow $100,000, then over 10 years, then that tells me how much I have to pay per month. So I'll pay one amount to mortgage, to repay the loan, and I'll pay an equal amount into my own savings account to gather the points. But the thing about the point system is that everyone can go into the web and see how many points they've got. They can take a loan. They can see how many points it costs. The good thing with this is that you formalize something, and you've sort of created a system that everyone can accept as being reasonable or reasonable enough. Now, back in the old days, when interest rates were around 7, 8, 9, sometimes even higher, this was a great deal. It's a really good deal. If you're a member of the JAK Bank, you have to be a member, and it only costs 200 crowns, which is $10, maybe less. No, it's not $10, maybe 20. Yeah, something up. But anyway, it cost very little to be a member. It meant that you could borrow very cheaply. It did, of course, mean that you tied up a bit of money because you had to save. But on the other hand, it was worth it for the benefit. A lot of people back then, not now, but a lot of people back then actually mortgaged their house. And at one point, when they'd actually paid everything back, well, they paid the loan off, but when they paid the loan off, they actually received they were able to take out as much money that they saved, which meant they could use it for repairs or for upgrades or whatever. So people felt it was a great way to save as well. So that's the system, that's the way it works. Any questions about the system? Comments?
Yes, sorry. Could you please, the 3% you mentioned there, that in your formula sounds like 3% monthly, but that would go out to 3% annually? Or
sorry,
3%
that's 3% annually on the amount that you owe. So in the beginning you pay 3% on the full amount, but then as time goes on you pay just 3% on the mortgaged amount.
So that is so in your formula it would be a 12 of 3% if you profit monthly.
That's correct, yeah.
Right.
Questions here?
Great. You're doing better than most JAK people. They don't really understand the system. They just trust it.
It's alright. Sounds good.
Yeah? Okay. So let's talk about solidarity, because you can run savings support networks. Because one of our biggest successes that we've had is to go to the municipalities and say, look, you've got a lot of money passing through, and this money comes from citizens, and this money should really be used for the benefit of these citizens in terms of municipal taxes and fees that they collect. So we persuade them to open up a JAK account and just have all the money come through and sit there, the money they're not using for a few months. And then it means that they can accumulate a lot of points, and then local municipal projects can come to them and say, look, we want a loan with JK Bank, but we don't want to save because it creates a cash flow problem for us. Can you donate points to us? And a lot of municipalities have been very happy to do that when the projects have been helping the communities. The other thing we do is do circles. So what you can do is you can put money into your account, and you can say that all the points in my account go to help a certain project. It's also been done that people have come to JK and have had a lot of problems paying off their debts. And so some people have got together and borrowed money and helped people pay off their debts. They've swapped points with each other, they've pulled points, they've pulled money, and they've helped people get on the right track. And that they've done through these local chapters. So it's quite interesting that you've got one central bank, which is in Sweden, but because you've got these local chapters and they meet, in the local meeting hall and have local courses, Up in the north, there's this lovely little shop, and they've kind of got a little JAK Bank corner, so people go into the cafe, and they see that the bank is real people having real thoughts about helping people's economy. And that's a point I think I'd like to make to you guys. It might be possible to do something similar. So these are my thoughts. It's not that you've got a bank and it's about lending money. I don't think it is. The thing is, you've got a bank, and a bank creates believability. There's a lot of knowledge in the bank. There's a lot of knowledge. I mean, I could see the fact that if you're a member in the JK Bank, you'd actually have free access to the lawyer cafe, things like that. You could do a bank within a bank, because every single chapter, remember, we've got 40,000 members and 27 local chapters, but the 27 local chapters have their own little administration that is run by the big administration in the bank. It works really well, you know. So when they want to rent a hall or something, they say, "Oh, I'm from JK Bank," and the hall, of course, says, "Oh, you're from JK Bank. Well, obviously, we'll lend you a hall." And then they send them an invoice, and then the administration pays the invoice and just takes the money off their account. So that works really well. Another thing that might be really possible to do with JK is banking software's got really good now, to a point where you can create as many accounts under your own account as you like. It would be possible to create, if you like, a mutual credit account. It would be possible, say for example, you've got 40,000 people, it would be possible to create 40,000 accounts where we all put in, we all borrow or ask for a credit of say 100,000 crowns, and then we just start paying each other, you know, with money we don't have.
The government.
And the funny thing is this is the way central banks work. But if you got big enough, and this is what Matthew Slater talks about, that mutual credit, you don't really see it as money. That's possible. Another thing I'd like to do, we haven't done it in the bank, but I'd love to do it. I'd love to buy debt. I'd love us to create a subsidiary which buys debt, because it would be possible to buy debt at about 50% of the debt, and then you could do a write-off for members, you know, a solidarity thing. Or you could say to the member, okay, well, you can pay it off at a low rate of interest. Because normally if you're in debt and you're in trouble, you have to pay debt on debt and debt and debt and debt on debt, whereas the debt collector buys the debt at 50%. So there's some solidarity there. I think the big potential, of course, is bringing people together and having these maker spaces and hackathons. And the other thought, I think, is using the competence in knowing about the law and knowing about what's possible to help support projects. What I find is when small business people and communities get together, they don't really know very much about money, and they don't really know about the possibilities of what they can do and what they can't. I found the legal session that we just had was very refreshing. The other thing is, of course, it does cost a lot, so you're taking a risk, and it might be worthwhile, as was pointed out earlier, start small and incorporate into a bank when you've got enough people. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Super helpful. Do we have any questions here? Okay, so Rick and Grant, and then I just want to do a time check. It's 1:38, and let's be sure that we have enough time for Phil to present everything he wants to, and then have a short discussion, question and answer with everyone. So we'll just take a few quick questions now. Go ahead, Rick.
I see the wisdom of applying this to something that interests me, namely helping older people who are struggling with the anxiety of paying their mortgage on a fixed income. My question is, does it make sense if credit is credibility, do we have to create enough distress to convince the bank that they're going to have to sell us the debt at 50% off? Or is there a less stressful way to buy the debt of older people on fixed income and ease their minds and contribute to the common good?
Particularly if we link it with their long-term care and their health and wellness network.
So, Steve, do you have an answer for that, or anyone can offer an answer?
My answer would be each loan officer in our bank, they do a risk analysis of each loan. And you're a happy bank if you've got a lot of loans with low risk, and you're an unhappy bank if you've got a lot of loans with high risk. So I would think that banks are very happy to sell debt to another organisation if they perceive it, which is what you're talking about. Sorry. Yeah. if they perceive it as being high risk.
Gotcha.
And
But
Janelle,
being linked to care is very interesting. Very interesting.
yes. Janelle, are you with us? Did you want to say anything to that?
Yeah, sorry, I don't actually have anything to add. I just want to say that was very inspiring. So thank you.
Cool, thanks. Matthew, did you want to make your comment aloud?
I understood from the Rolling Jubilee campaign, when I had a brief correspondence with them, that they would buy lots of loans, because the banks have just made the loan and then sold it on as a commodity. And it's been sliced and diced and stamped and everything. So you can't just go to a bank and say, I'd like to buy this person's loan.
Yeah, what we've talked about here briefly, John understands it better than I do, but pooling money to pay off the highest interest debt first, so just save the money that would have been going out in interest, and then people could, I mean, somewhat like the energy project that I've talked about with Allied Drive, like people could keep paying back even at a lower rate than they would have been paying, but at a higher rate than what they're really needing to pay to their savings pool. And that what would have been interest goes to feed the pool and help buy off the next chunk of debt. Does that somewhat represent the idea we've discussed?
Yes, that's exactly what we've been discussing, paying off the loan at 100% of the loan value. If you want to buy the loan at 50%, then you have to go to the bank and make a deal with them and identify exactly what the loan is, and that might be much harder.
Yes. That's why we need our credit unions to participate in the conversation, and they are interested in doing so. Go ahead, Chris.
I was just kind of inspired by what you were saying, and just wondering, also as part of mutual aid networks, if Occupy Wall Street was buying debt, it was their Strike Debt campaign.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure if we would be able to, within our pilot site community, get packages of debt, and just as a common welfare, use some of our donations or pooling of funds to just buy off debt in that community, so increase community wealth.
My understanding from the little bit of communicating with people from Occupy is that they're buying undifferentiated debt packages. They don't know which loans they're taking up, and that's kind of because they're going through brokering services primarily.
Yeah, but they had some idea, like it was medical debt. Maybe they didn't know geographically where it was.
Whether it's tuition debt or medical debt or something like that, but they don't know which particular ones. There's a barrier to debt.
Which in some ways would be quite a beautiful thing to be one of the things that we could do.
And I was saying, like, we don't need to know the specific person, but it would be interesting to be like, and here's the medical debt in Madison. Here's
if
a package of that.
Get that finally done, that would be great.
Or some kind of.
Is there a way to work with real estate investors to be able to buy a property and do reverse mortgages to pay for the living expenses of these people who can't afford, while they sign over the beneficiary of their house to a community pool?
Let me answer that. That's something that we've been looking at, which is community land trust ideas. And I think there's a lot of power in them because, as I said, you don't want money, you want what money buys. And it is absolute stupidity in making house prices rise above their replacement value. House prices should be on what it costs to build the asset, rather than an inflated price. So therefore, it's much better to have a community land trust, which makes sure that rents are reasonable.
And what about variable life annuities? To be able to do those types of investments in a pooled source, where at the end of the death, the beneficiary would go again to this community pool.
Yeah, that's where you've got to get back to Janelle, because banks aren't allowed to own things. In Sweden, banks aren't allowed to own shares in companies, and they're not either allowed to own property. But in some...
But this would be like on life insurance beneficiaries.
Yeah, right. But what we were looking at in JAK, although we never did it, that was to create subsidiaries. Mm-hmm. But then you get into the whole thing of they call it concern interest, where a group of companies starts to get together and comes under scrutiny as well. But the thing is, once you've got the bank going and the competence and the interest, you can do a lot of things, because you're creating that energy around the money. Another thing I'd like to say is, and something that we've been considering, although I say we, as a few people on the board, it's very unofficial, but I mean, why start a bank? You know, why not go to an existing bank and say to them, are you interested in having, say, 100,000 new members, new customers?
Well, yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about with our credit union. And with a credit union, it's nice because then it's cooperation among co-ops, and they're very interested in that, taking that further.
Yeah. So the power is in the network. Mm-hmm. It's not in actually owning the bank, again. It's in the power of what you have.
I would like to
I'll shut up.
As far away from being a bank as possible, and as far away from banks and overall as possible. But one of the things that they were interested in is, this also just came up very briefly, but we had a meeting with Michelle Bowens and some people who are working on a web thing called Sensorica, which is about how to create a peer-to-peer economic tools that support the peer-to-peer economy and open source development work in particular, and just recognizing that in an open source project, free contributions pile up and pile up and pile up, and then finally the very last person in the chain finds a way to cash in. What Sensorica is doing is developing mechanisms to automatically pay back to people who've contributed, and it did come up very briefly with Summit Credit Union, because they were asking if every individual would also want an account, and we were talking about how nice it would be to just have money sort of flowing automatically into people's credit union accounts from the contributions that they're putting toward their mutual aid network. So it seemed to really interest them, or that was my read on it, that like a role they could play in helping usher in a new economy that's more equitable. Barry, what's your question?
When you get points from the municipalities, donations, what do you do with the points, and why would you want
Stephanie, could you repeat the question, because I didn't hear it?
When you get points from municipalities, what do you do with the points? Why would you want them?
Well, no, the people in the municipality, projects in the municipality are able to borrow money without having to pay, without having to save the money, and that improves the project's cash flow.
Great, thank you.
I was just going to say Bob and Lynn are going to be here tomorrow during the leader thing where they can talk more about the value equation and that kind of.
Yeah, so did you guys hear Chris? Bob and Lynn will be here tomorrow for the software thing to talk about this Sensorica sort of application. Grant?
So I want to go back to the formula, the payment formula, and wonder how does the bank make its revenue if it doesn't charge interest?
Did you hear that?
Yeah, I heard that. Well, banks. Well, that's the thing about having a bank that isn't a corporation. The bank only has to pay its expenses. So it's the 3% service charge that pays all wages. And then we have a membership fee as well. There's a slight fee if you have a credit card, and there's a fee to have a certain number of accounts. So people really pay to cover costs that way. We get 30 million is what we cost to run, and of that, most of it comes from the debt service charge, except about 7 million, which comes from membership fees.
And those are kroners, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So would it be accurate to say that it's not interest free, but rather it's compound interest free, and there is a simple interest charge?
Yes, correct. And in fact, that's the way we declare it to authorities, because the way the authorities define interest, and many people as well, the service charge fits the definition of interest. That's correct, but it doesn't compound, and it doesn't. I mean, most banks don't give a fixed lending rate, but we do. So people know what their debt is going to cost from the outset.
Great.
Most banks have floating rates.
Thank you.